The best commentaries from the last video.
I always knew my wife had secrets. But I never imagined I'd find another man in our basement. Claire and I had been married for 5 years. We had what most people would call a picture-perfect life. A nice suburban home, good jobs, no kids yet but talking about it. I thought I knew everything about her. But in the past few months, something had changed. She had become distant, secretive. At first, I assumed it was work stress. Then I started noticing odd behaviors. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and go downstairs, sometimes staying for hours. If I asked, she would just say she couldn't sleep and was organizing old storage boxes. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I pretended to be asleep and waited until she made her usual trip downstairs. Once she was gone, I quietly got out of bed and tiptoed down the hall. The basement door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see the faint glow of a light. Then I heard whispering. It sent a chill down my spine. She was talking to someone. I strained to listen, but the words were too muffled. My heart pounded as I backed away and hurried back to bed before she could catch me. That night I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities. Who was she talking to? Was she on the phone? Or was there someone down there with her? The next day, I searched the house, looking for anything suspicious. I checked the basement door and noticed something I had never seen before, a brand new lock. It was a heavy-duty deadbolt, the kind you'd use to keep something, or someone, inside. That was the moment I knew I had to find out the truth. Later that evening, when Claire was in the shower, I took a risk. I went through her purse, hands shaking, and found what I was looking for, a small silver key. My pulse raced as I stood in front of the basement door, key in hand. I hesitated. If I opened that door, there was no going back. But I had to know. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The deadbolt clicked open. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. And what I found made my blood run cold. The basement was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and something else, a scent that was strangely familiar but out of place. As I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the mattress pushed against the far wall, covered in a tangle of blankets. Empty food containers littered the floor beside it, along with bottles of water and a small pile of clothes. Someone had been living here. A single overhead bulb flickered as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I scanned the room. And then I saw it. A framed photograph sitting on an old wooden crate. I stepped closer, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. It was Claire, smiling, happy, but standing next to a man I had never seen before. He had dark hair, sharp features, and an arm wrapped around her waist as if he had every right to hold her that way. I didn't hear the creak of the stairs until it was too late. "Ethan?" Claire's voice sent a jolt of panic through me. I turned to see her standing at the top of the basement stairs, her face pale, eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing down here?" she demanded, her voice unsteady. I held up the photo. "Who is he, Claire?" My voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she took a hesitant step forward, then another, her hands trembling. "Ethan, you don't understand." I took a step back, my pulse racing. "Don't lie to me. Who the hell is he?" Claire swallowed hard, glancing past me to the mattress, to the scattered belongings. Then, something flickered across her face, not just fear, but something else. Regret. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just a secret. It was a betrayal. A noise behind me made me spin around. A shadow moved. Someone else was in the basement with us. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. I wasn't alone with Claire. I whipped around, adrenaline surging through my veins. In the dim light, I caught a figure shifting behind a stack of boxes. A man. Tall, gaunt, and disheveled, his eyes wide with shock, maybe even fear. "Who the hell are you?" I growled, stepping between him and Claire. My fists clenched at my sides. He didn't answer, just stared at me with hollow eyes. The dim light cast shadows on his sunken cheeks, making him look like he had been living in darkness for years. Claire rushed forward, reaching for my arm. "Ethan, please!" I jerked away from her touch. "No more lies, Claire." "Who is he?" The man licked his cracked lips, his voice hoarse. "My name is Daniel." Daniel. The name sent a cold wave through my body. I knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Daniel had been Claire's fiancé before me. The man who had died in a tragic accident 5 years ago. I took a shaky breath, my world tilting. "That's impossible," I whispered. "You're supposed to be dead." Daniel gave a weak chuckle. "Yeah, I hear that a lot." My head snapped toward Claire. "You told me he died. You mourned him. You married me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had no choice." I let out a hollow laugh, my anger boiling over. "No choice? You've been keeping a dead man in our basement." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "It's not what you think, Ethan. I didn't fake my death. Claire helped me disappear." I staggered back, the room spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about my life, was a lie. The truth was staring me in the face. And I didn't know if I was ready to hear it. My mind was a whirlwind of disbelief and rage. Daniel wasn't dead. He had been here, hiding in my own home. And Claire had known. I took a step back, trying to steady myself. The room felt suffocating. My wife, had been sheltering another man, a man she once loved, a man she told me was gone forever. "You helped him disappear?" My voice sounded foreign, unsteady. Claire wiped her eyes, but it wasn't sorrow I saw. It was fear. "I had to," she whispered. "I couldn't let them find him." "Who?" My pulse thundered in my ears. "Who was looking for him?" Daniel let out a weak chuckle. "You think this is just about an affair?" I glared at him. "I don't know what the hell to think." Claire took a deep breath. "Ethan, Daniel didn't just fake his death to leave me. He had to disappear because people wanted him dead." I scoffed. "So what, you're telling me you've been protecting him from some secret assassins?" Claire flinched. Daniel's expression darkened. "This isn't a joke," Daniel said. "I used to work for them." My stomach lurched. "Who?" Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "The company. The people who don't exist. The ones who erase people for a living." I narrowed my eyes. "You expect me to believe this? That you're some kind of, what? A government assassin?" "I was," Daniel admitted. "Until I knew too much. Until they wanted to erase me." The room fell silent. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a vice. Claire clutched my arm, her fingers trembling. "Ethan, I never wanted to lie to you. But if I told you, they would have come for you too." I exhaled sharply, my mind spinning. Everything about my life, my marriage, had been a carefully constructed lie. Then I realized something. "If they wanted you dead, why haven't they found you yet?" I asked Daniel. "Why now?" He hesitated, then his jaw clenched. "Because someone tipped them off." The air in the basement turned ice cold. A slow, sinking realization settled in my gut. Claire wasn't just hiding him. She was running out of time. And now, so was I. The basement walls seemed to close in as the weight of Daniel's words settled over me. My wife had lied. She hadn't just kept a secret, she had orchestrated a deception so elaborate that I had been living in a fantasy while a ghost from her past rotted beneath our feet. And now, that ghost had brought death to our doorstep. I inhaled sharply, trying to make sense of it all. "Who tipped them off?" Daniel exhaled through his nose. "Could be anyone. A single mistake. A traceable call. Maybe someone saw me." Claire stiffened. "I was careful." "Not careful enough," he shot back. His voice was a low growl, hoarse from years of hiding. A sudden thought struck me, chilling me to my core. "And what happens now?" Daniel's expression turned grim. "They'll come. It's just a matter of when. A cold weight pressed against my chest. Whoever they were, these people had resources. They had erased Daniel before. They would do it again. Only this time, they'd erase anyone who got in their way. Claire gripped my arm. Ethan, we can leave. We still have time. I jerked away from her touch. We? You still think we're a we? I let out a bitter laugh. You've been lying to me for years, Claire. Years! And now I'm supposed to just run with you. Her eyes pleaded. I did it to protect you. Daniel scoffed. That's rich. Protecting him by keeping him in the dark? Typical. I turned to him, rage bubbling beneath my skin. And what exactly is your plan, Daniel? You've had 5 years to figure this out, and you're still living in my basement. He hesitated. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in his face. They won't stop, he finally admitted. The moment they confirm I'm alive, they'll send someone to clean it up. That means you too? My stomach twisted. So what, we just wait for them to show up and kill us all? Daniel met my gaze. Not if we make the first move. Claire swallowed hard. No. We run. That's what we planned. Disappear again, before they catch on. I shook my head. No. I'm done running from a life I didn't even know I was a part of. I turned to Daniel. Tell me everything. Now. Claire let out a panicked breath. Ethan, don't. I ignored her. Who are these people? And why do they want you dead? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But once you hear this, there's no going back. I crossed my arms. I think I passed that point when I found a dead man eating my food. Daniel rubbed a hand down his face. I worked for an organization known as Apex. It's not officially government-run, but it has ties. Think deep black ops. Off-the-books assassinations, destabilization missions, things that don't exist on paper. My mind reeled. You were a hitman. Daniel's jaw tensed. I was an operative. A tool for them. Until I started asking the wrong questions. Claire squeezed her eyes shut. Stop. He ignored her. I found out things I wasn't supposed to. Names, locations, operations. Things even the government didn't know about. They marked me for elimination. I ran a hand through my hair. And Claire? How does she fit into this? Daniel's gaze flickered toward her. She was my exit plan. I froze. What? Claire's voice cracked. Ethan, please. Daniel continued. I knew I couldn't run alone. I needed help. Claire was the only one I trusted. My stomach lurched. You dragged her into this? Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. She chose to help. I turned to Claire. You knew what he was. And you still helped him? Tears slipped down her cheeks. I thought it was over. I thought we could disappear, and they'd forget about him. About us. I let out a bitter laugh. So you lied to me? Every single day. Claire sobbed. I love you, Ethan. I wanted a life with you. I shook my head. You wanted a fantasy. And you expected me to live in it with you. A noise outside made all three of us freeze. A car rolling to a stop. Daniel's entire posture shifted. They're here. The nightmare had finally caught up to us. The sound of the car stopping outside sent a shiver down my spine. Daniel's entire body tensed, his eyes darting toward Claire, who was already pale and trembling. I moved toward the basement stairs, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. We need to move. No. Daniel whispered harshly. I turned to Claire. You said you were careful? Then why the hell are they here? She swallowed hard. I don't know. I never made any calls, never used the internet for anything suspicious. Daniel cursed under his breath. They found us. Someone gave us away. For a moment, the house was eerily silent. Then, the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming shut. Multiple doors. More than one person. I rushed up the stairs 2 at a time and reached the front door. Peering through the peephole, I saw them. 2 black SUVs. 4 men in tactical gear. They weren't ordinary cops. I turned back to Daniel. You said they'd come to clean up. What does that mean? He exhaled, his face grim. It means they're here to kill everyone and burn the evidence. I felt the blood drain from my face. Claire gasped, covering her mouth. We have to go. Out the back. Daniel hissed, already moving. I hesitated for half a second. Then I ran. We dashed through the house toward the back door. Claire fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking. A loud knock echoed through the front of the house. Open the door. We know you're in there. I grabbed Claire's wrist. Move. Daniel threw open the back door, and we bolted into the yard, ducking behind the tool shed. Heavy boots thudded against the porch. They were coming in. Daniel pulled something from his pocket, his phone. He tapped the screen furiously before turning to me. I set up cameras around the house a week ago. I have a live feed. I took the phone from him, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The screen showed multiple angles of our home. The front door was breached. A group of men stormed inside, moving with the precision of trained operatives. Their faces were unreadable behind black masks. One of them spoke. Secure the rooms. If he's here, we take him. If not, we torch it. My blood ran cold. They weren't just here for Daniel. They were willing to kill us all. Keep moving, Daniel ordered. We need distance. We sprinted through the neighboring yards, avoiding street lights. Claire was struggling to keep up, her breaths ragged and panicked. Then, Daniel grabbed my arm and yanked me behind a row of bushes. He pointed to the phone screen. The camera in the basement was still rolling. And what I saw made my stomach twist in horror. One of the masked men was standing there, looking directly at the camera. Then, he lifted his hand and waved. He knew we were watching. A distorted voice crackled through the feed. You can run, but we always find you. The screen went black. A chill spread through my entire body. Daniel clenched his jaw. We're out of time. I turned to Claire, whose face was drained of all color. What do we do? She whispered. Daniel didn't hesitate. We stop running. I stared at him. What are you saying? He exhaled, his expression cold and unyielding. We take the fight to them. For the first time since this nightmare started, I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready to kill. Daniel's words sent a ripple of unease through me. We take the fight to them? I wasn't a fighter. I was an ordinary man who had just discovered his wife had been lying for years and that a team of trained killers was hunting us down. And now Daniel wanted us to go on the offensive? But then I thought about the masked man on the camera. The way he waved, knowing we were watching. They weren't afraid. They were taunting us. And that made my blood boil. I clenched my fists. What's the plan? Daniel gave me an approving nod. Good. We can't run forever, and they won't stop. But if we hit first, we gain control. Claire swallowed hard. Ethan, are you sure about this? I turned to her, seeing the fear in her eyes. Do you have a better option? She hesitated, then shook her head. Daniel pulled out his phone again and showed me a map. There's an abandoned property 2 miles from here. It's been empty for years, and I stashed some supplies there. If we can make it, we set the trap. I frowned. What kind of supplies? Daniel's expression darkened. Weapons. Surveillance gear. Things I kept in case they ever found me. Claire exhaled sharply, clearly disturbed by how prepared Daniel had been for this moment. But she didn't argue. Let's move, Daniel ordered. We moved carefully through the trees, keeping low and avoiding open streets. The city was eerily quiet, the occasional distant car the only sound in the darkness. Every shadow felt like it was watching us. As we neared the property, Daniel held up a hand, signaling for us to stop. Something's wrong. I strained my ears, but I heard nothing. What? He pointed at the dirt path leading to the old house. Footprints. Fresh ones. They got here first, he murmured. Claire sucked in a breath. Then what do we do? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He scanned the area, then handed me a small black object. A gun. I stared at it. I've never. You might have to. Daniel cut me off. Keep the safety on. Only use it if you have no choice. I swallowed hard, gripping the cold metal. This was real. Life or death. Daniel pulled a knife from his belt and gestured for us to follow. Stay close. We do this quietly. We crept toward the house, my heart pounding with each step. The front door was slightly ajar. Someone had forced their way in. Daniel moved first, slipping inside like a shadow. Claire and I followed, careful to avoid making noise. Inside, the place was trashed. Old furniture was overturned, dust disturbed, footprints leading deeper in. A sound. A low shuffle. Daniel motioned for us to stay back as he crept forward. I gripped the gun tighter, my palms slick with sweat. Then a voice. Cold. Amused. We've been expecting you. A light flickered on, blinding us. And standing in the center of the room was the masked man from the camera. Smiling. The masked man stood in the dim light, his gloved hands casually resting at his sides. He wasn't holding a weapon, but the confidence in his stance told me he didn't need one. He already had control of the situation. Daniel tensed beside me, his fingers tightening around the knife handle. Claire let out a small, involuntary gasp, stepping closer to me. I could feel the tremor in her body. The man tilted his head slightly. You've been running for so long, Daniel. Did you really think we wouldn't find you? Daniel didn't respond. His whole body was coiled like a spring, waiting to strike. The man chuckled. And Ethan. His gaze shifted to me. The devoted husband. The one who never asked too many questions. How does it feel to know your entire life was built on a lie? My grip tightened around the gun. My breath was shallow, ragged. Who the hell are you? The man took a slow step forward. I go by many names. But you can call me Bishop. Daniel let out a sharp breath, his expression darkening. They sent you? Bishop nodded. Of course they did. You were a valuable asset, Daniel. You should have known they wouldn't let you go so easily. Claire shook her head, her voice breaking. We just wanted to be free. Bishop sighed theatrically. Free? No one walks away from Apex. And you? He pointed at me, his voice almost pitying. You got caught in the middle of something far bigger than you understand. I took a step forward, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Then explain it to me. Bishop smirked. Why should I? You won't live long enough for it to matter. Daniel moved first. A blur of motion, his knife flashing toward Bishop's throat. But Bishop was faster. With a sudden, effortless grace, he sidestepped, grabbed Daniel's wrist, and twisted. There was a sickening crack as the knife clattered to the floor. Daniel grunted in pain, falling to one knee. Before I could react, Bishop reached into his coat and pulled out a gun, leveling it at Daniel's head. Claire let out a strangled cry. No! I didn't think. I just acted. Raising my own gun, I fired. The shot echoed through the house. Bishop staggered back, a dark stain spreading across his shoulder. He cursed under his breath, his gun wavering for just a moment. Daniel didn't hesitate. Despite his injured arm, he lunged forward, slamming his fist into Bishop's jaw. The man reeled back, colliding with the old wooden table behind him. Papers and dust flew into the air. Move! Daniel barked at us. Claire grabbed my wrist, dragging me toward the door. My heart pounded as we stumbled into the cold night air. Behind us, I could hear Bishop groaning, struggling to rise. Daniel wasn't far behind, his face twisted in pain, his arm hanging limply at his side. We need to finish this, he gasped. I swallowed hard. How? Daniel's eyes burned with something lethal. By cutting off the head of the snake. I looked at Claire. Her expression was unreadable, a storm of emotions flickering across her face. Then, for the first time, she spoke with certainty. We go after Apex. No more running. No more hiding. We were going to end this. The cold night air stung my face as we ran, our breath coming in ragged gasps. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to take a moment to process everything, but there was no time. Behind us, Bishop was recovering, and his men wouldn't be far behind. Daniel led the way, clutching his injured arm, blood soaking through his sleeve. Claire stayed close to me, her fingers digging into my wrist. I could feel her fear, but there was something else in her grip, determination. We reached an abandoned gas station a mile away, ducking inside to catch our breath. The flickering neon sign barely illuminated the cracked pavement and boarded-up windows. Daniel collapsed against the wall, gritting his teeth as he tried to stop the bleeding. We can't keep running like this, I said, trying to steady my breathing. They'll find us. Daniel exhaled sharply. Then we need to take the fight to them. Apex won't stop until we're dead. Claire knelt beside him, tearing a strip of fabric from her shirt to wrap around his wound. We need a plan. Daniel's jaw clenched. I have one. I frowned. Let's hear it. He met my gaze. Apex operates out of a secured facility outside the city. If we can get inside, access their main servers, we can expose them. Claire stiffened. Expose them? That's suicide. Daniel shook his head. Not if we do it right. I know the layout, security patterns, and weak points. If we take out their infrastructure, they'll be vulnerable. I hesitated. How do we even get in? Daniel's expression darkened. We have help. Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of tires screeching outside made us all freeze. They found us, Claire whispered. Daniel pushed himself up, wincing. We need to move. We bolted out the back, slipping into the alley behind the station. A black SUV rolled up, headlights sweeping across the cracked asphalt. My stomach twisted into knots. Then, to my horror, Claire's grip on my hand loosened. I turned to see her stepping back. Claire? I breathed. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she looked at Daniel. I'm sorry. Before I could react, she pulled something from her pocket, a small device with a blinking red light. Daniel's face contorted in shock. You! Claire's voice broke. They gave me no choice. A sharp beeping filled the air. My mind barely had time to register what was happening before the explosion ripped through the alley, sending us flying. Pain shot through my body as I hit the pavement. My ears rang, my vision blurred. Through the haze of dust and fire, I saw figures moving, Apex operatives, moving in with weapons drawn. I turned my head, searching for Daniel. He was lying motionless a few feet away. Blood pooled beneath him. Claire stood over him, her expression unreadable. Bishop emerged from the smoke, a satisfied smirk on his face. Good work, Claire. Betrayal burned through me like acid. Claire had turned us in. And now we were dead. Pain radiated through my body as I struggled to push myself up. My ears rang from the explosion, the world around me a blur of dust and smoke. Through the haze I saw them, Bishop, standing tall, his smirk unwavering, and Claire, her expression torn between regret and resolve. Daniel lay motionless a few feet away, blood pooling beneath him. I had no idea if he was still alive. My chest heaved with ragged breaths, my mind screaming at me to move, to fight, to do something. But the weight of betrayal pinned me down more than my injuries ever could. Bishop crouched beside me, gripping my chin between his fingers. You should have stayed out of this, Ethan, he murmured. You were never supposed to be part of the game. I spat blood at his feet. Screw you. He chuckled, shaking his head. Still got some fight in you. Good. He stood, nodding toward Claire. Finish it. Claire's hands trembled as she pulled a gun from her coat. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her gaze, hesitation. I forced myself to my knees, my voice barely above a whisper. Is this really who you are? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't have a choice, Ethan. There's always a choice. I shot back. You just made the wrong one. Her fingers twitched on the trigger. Then chaos erupted. A gunshot rang out, but not from Claire's weapon. Bishop staggered backward, clutching his shoulder, his smirk finally wiped clean. A second shot followed, striking one of the Apex operatives as they rushed forward. Daniel was alive. He was bleeding, barely holding himself up, but he had managed to grab a discarded gun. "Run!" he rasped. I didn't hesitate. I lunged at Claire, knocking the gun from her hands as another round of bullets tore through the alley. I didn't care about the pain, didn't care about the past, I just knew I had to end this. Bishop recovered fast. Too fast. He grabbed Claire, using her as a shield. "Back off, Ethan, or she dies." I hesitated. As much as I hated her for what she'd done, I couldn't just let her die. Daniel didn't share my sentiment. He lifted his gun again, his voice cold. She made her choice. Claire whimpered, tears streaking her face. "Please. I was trying to protect you." I saw it then, the regret, the realization that she had chosen the wrong side. Too late for that. I muttered. Bishop snarled and shoved Claire aside, raising his own weapon. But before he could fire, I moved. Time slowed as I lunged forward, grabbing the knife from Daniel's belt. Bishop's gun went off, the bullet grazing my shoulder, but I didn't stop. I drove the blade into his chest with all the force I had left. Bishop gasped, his body stiffening. His gun fell from his grip as he staggered backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then he collapsed. Silence fell over the alley. The remaining Apex operatives, seeing their leader dead, hesitated, just long enough for Daniel to take one more shot, forcing them to retreat. I stumbled, my head spinning. Claire was on the ground, sobbing. Daniel limped toward me, gripping my arm to keep himself upright. "It's over," he said, his voice raw. But it wasn't. Not really. Apex was still out there. We had won this battle, but the war was far from finished. I looked down at Claire, her betrayal still fresh, still burning. "I can't forgive you," I told her honestly. "But I won't kill you either. That's your punishment, you have to live with what you did." Her sobs turned into quiet gasps, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her guilt. Daniel and I turned, leaving her behind. We had work to do. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.